are listening to Trans Resistor Radio. I am your host, Aaron Franz. My website is theageoftransitions.com. Please check it out. You can get past episodes of Trans Resistor Radio. You can get original articles, videos, and much more. theageoftransitions.com. And if you've been listening to Trans Resistor Radio recently, you know that I've been doing a special series entitled Under the Sun, which is about the ancient mystery tradition, getting into the many occult and esoteric symbols of alchemy, the great work of ages. And tonight on the show, Trans Resistor Radio, we get back to interviewing guests again. We have a very special guest who is right in line with the Under the Sun series, so I'm very excited about this. Tonight's guest is an author and commentator. She's the author of many, many books. I think at least 10 books that she's written or co-written. Tonight, my guest is author and commentator Tracy R. Twyman. I would like to welcome you to the show, Tracy. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron. It's good to be here.
I'm excited about this very much. Now, your recent book is entitled Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge. I was wondering, could you give us a quick synopsis of what that book is?
Sure, yeah. This is my second book on economic alchemy, or alchonomics, as I call it. And the first one was Solomon's Treasure, written in 2005. And so this is an update on that, but also taking it a bit further. I'm writing about the parallels between modern economics, the way that the international monetary system works, and alchemy. And, you know, coming at it from the perspective really of someone who, you know, has studied the occult and alchemy quite a lot, and then, you know, someone who knows a bit about economics as well. It's definitely, they're definitely connected. It's not just a metaphor, although there's quite a lot of that to be had in the book, but also, I'm literally going through the history of money and how it developed, and the fact that a lot of the people who were influential in actually changing the way that money works were alchemists and said that what they were doing was alchemy, and that there's actually a lot of explicitly alchemical symbols that are used with money, including the dollar symbol, which actually is the same as the caduceus. In fact, I go through several arguments or explanations tracing the dollar symbol directly to the caduceus, and I really make a very good argument. I must say, it's definitely, that's where it comes from. That's what it's meant. It means the magical transformation, the alchemical transformation symbolized by the caduceus. So that's what that book is about.
Sure. Now, alchemy itself is such a mystifying subject, and there are many different ways to interpret it. I was wondering, what is your definition? What's Tracy R. Twyman's definition of alchemy?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is a very broad term, and kind of like, you know, the Holy Grail. It can be used as a metaphor for all sorts of things. But I guess the basics is transformation of one thing into another magically, without direct supernatural, or in a supernatural way, I guess. And specifically when we're applying this to economics, of course, alchemy is described in the alchemical literature as the science of turning lead into gold. That's the most normal explanation of alchemy that most people are used to, right? And that is what's happening, or things that are not worth anything are being turned magically through the process of faith and into things of value, gold, and specifically the U.S. dollar, which is at this point, ever since the 1970s, not connected to gold at all. It still represents gold and acts as gold on the international market, because traditionally gold has been the international currency, the way you settle accounts between countries, because of course each country, would normally have its own currency that, is mainly valuable to the people that live there. But when you do trade between countries, traditionally for the last couple hundred years, it's been Well, more than that, actually. It's gold. It's gold. Gold is the international currency. And so when in the 1970s, well, in the 1930s, the U.S. government replaced the role that gold was playing in the U.S. economy, backing the dollar, and basically changed it and said, okay, the dollar is as good as gold. The dollar plays the role of gold in the international economy. So instead of holding gold in your central bank, in a country's central bank, to back its currency, the U.S. arranged towards the end of World War II at this conference called Bretton Woods, arranged for all these other countries around the world to hold this U.S. dollar as if it were gold, and it was directly transferable into gold at that time for those other countries, for those central banks in those other countries, because at any time we had this agreement that they could redeem the dollars they were holding in gold. Mm-hmm. But then that agreement was broken in the 1970s.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, for the longest time, people in the United States were actually not allowed to use gold as money, and they actually confiscated gold from all the people in the 1930s. In 1933, they made everyone turn their gold into the government, or else they would get arrested. And then they gave them paper dollars in exchange. The next year, those dollars had been devalued by 40%. So think about that's what's going on in the country. And then, but internationally, if you held dollars in another country's bank, then you could redeem those for gold at a fixed price of $35 an ounce, and the price stayed fixed until the 70s. And of course, its relationship to gold the dollar's relationship to gold at that point had changed completely. And so that's why in the 70s, Richard Nixon closed the gold window and basically reneged on this international agreement to redeem dollars in gold. And so, anyway, that's the whole process. That's how we got to where we are. And, the alchemy, as far as I've explained it so far, it's a metaphor. But as I get into the books, it's more than just that. It was deliberately designed this way.
Yeah, well, the metaphor, I feel like with the alchemical allegories and metaphors, they become literal in high alchemy. With this base metals turned into gold, you could, I guess, as you're saying, you interpret the base metals as like coins, and coins are actually made out of metals that aren't worth as much as gold. And then the alchemist extracts the real wealth, being the gold, from that. So I guess it's the sort of metaphor made tangible in a way, is it not?
Well, yeah, and okay, there's several layers to this metaphor. One of them is the way that the economy functions. Okay, how is it that we make money out of nothing and it somehow becomes tangible wealth in the economy? Why does it become something that you can exchange for a good or service? Well, it happens through magic, really. We're all participating in a ritual every time we engage in economic transactions within our country. And if you look at the dollar bill itself, it's all laid out there. It's telling you that this is why it's valuable. It's got first of all, there's the color green, right? Which means it symbolizes fecundity or fertility. So it's the color is meant to make you think about the dollar as being wealth, and that it's your country's currency. You're supposed to feel good about your country and its prosperity, because that's what creates it. It's all based on confidence in the dollar. So if you don't have confidence in the dollar, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then all over the dollar bill you have you have the word one, right? The word one is put on there way more than it needs to be to establish that this is a $1 bill. It's put on there 13 times exactly, if you count the Latin word unum as well. You've got the word one, the number one, and then unum, and there's 13 of them. And of course, that's a a numerologically significant number. It's a Masonically significant number. And I, as I argued in my first book, Solomon's Treasure, it's alchemically significant. It's in many interpretations of alchemy, at least this number represents the universal solvent, the philosopher's stone, the moment of alchemical transformation. It's associated with the death's head symbolism, and the black sun, and at any rate. So, but the number one, why is it used on the dollar? Well, it's about the unity of the country and the fact that this dollar unifies not only everyone in the country, but really everyone who's engaging in this international market. And
it unifies the world because it's a world reserve currency.
Yeah, and if you don't, that's the thing. If you don't feel like you're part of that, then you're not participating in the magic, and you're taking away from the belief that feeds into it. So, that's there to sort of psychologically bring you into the magic or the hypnosis, and then of course the Great Seal itself, that eye over the pyramid. I mean, again, it represents that unity, but also that I think that it's been established that symbol really does connect to alchemy as well, because the people that put it there, were Freemasons. The decision to put it on the dollar bill, the people that invented it, did so back in 1770s. 70, around that time. right around revolutionary time. It was right there at the beginning, but they only put it on the back of the dollar bill around Roosevelt's time, actually at the same time that they were making all of these changes to the monetary system that I was explaining, where they're switching the dollar out for gold, or switching gold out for the dollar. Well, around that time they redesigned the dollar bill, and I think that that's not an accident. They are switching to a system that's based on faith entirely. Yeah. So you have to change the currency to sort of bring people into the the hypnosis. So at any rate, you were asking about
Well, I feel we've gotten off on a tangent, which is good. You're getting into the faith of money. Even it's a fiat currency, and fiat, the word, is faith, is it not?
Yeah, it means to make something happen by declaration. Like fiat lux is the Latin words for "let there be light." That's how God created the universe, and so
the light from the eye in the capstone, again, the connection to light we can see there clearly.
Oh, and then the people that were choosing to put the Great Seal with the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill were all involved with that. I don't think of that fellow's name. Nicholas Roerich. Okay, and he believed this Russian mystic. And he wrote about what he thought the symbolism of the eye in the pyramid was, and that it was connected to this basically Grail stone that he believed was hidden in the center of the earth, that these Himalayan adepts knew where it was, and the U.S. government financed a expedition with this guy. He went to the Himalayas to supposedly look for agricultural information about seeds and stuff, because there was the Dust Bowl happening back then, and they were looking for ways to improve agriculture in the United States. But that was the cover. He went over there and he was actually looking for the Grail in the entrance to the Hollow Earth. Huh. And anyway, so Roosevelt and Henry Morgenthau and all of who was the Secretary of Agriculture, all these people believed in this idea at the time. So it's very interesting, when you think about what was going on in the 1930s and how they were changing the U.S. monetary system, and then 10 years later applying it to the entire world, basically, to realize that these people were mystics and Freemasons and alchemists. So I think they knew absolutely what they were doing.
Sure, yeah, and again, the significance of the number one. And to get back to the color green, does the green color of the dollar bill, does that tie into the emerald tablet of Hermes? Because emerald is green, and I see the green color pop up in the Hermetic tradition a lot too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're right. Yeah, the this symbol of the Philosopher's Stone and the Grail is, in my opinion, the same thing. And the Emerald Tablet, yes. And what's his name that I was just mentioning, Nicholas Roerich, was all into that, you know. And and then they even said at that time there was this whole related interest in the Hollow Earth, and you know that the lore about the Hollow Earth is there's people living down there, and it's lit by this black sun. And then it's emitting something called the green ray. So you know, yeah, all of these things were, all of these concepts are connected, and they were of interest to the people that were redesigning the economy as well as the dollar bill itself back then. So yeah, you're right.
Now I wonder about the hollow earth idea. I'd like to get your idea on this. Is that kind of like a reference to fertility and the female generative principle, and also sort of the darkness of underground being the darkness of, you know, the unknown, and sort of, does this tie into the mystery of Isis and creation and generation? Do you think there's any tie-in with that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, there's a alchemical and esoteric, you know, saying or precept or whatever you want to call it, where it's basically like, you know, wisdom is cultivated, you know, underground, just like a seed is cultivated underground, and then it comes up from the surface and sprouts and grows into what it is. But yeah, the actual transformation takes place in the dark, right? I mean, even in alchemy, I mean, they say that you know, that the transformation has to take place in the dark. So, yeah, there's definitely a connection there.
Sure, and the darkness could also be like the darkness of the ignorance of the masses. Does that work? Being that the masses are ignorant of the process of coining money, so they're in the dark, and this whole art of alchemy is being done. It's being done and yet not seen or understood. And is that correct, do you think?
Oh, that's a good point. You know, yeah, because basically, there's some great quotes about the history of banking, right? There's some great quotes from people like Rothschilds, people who were involved in, you know, who are the heads of the actual intergenerational banking houses that engineered the banking system in the first place. And you know, they have said basically that the system couldn't exist if people in general, the masses, actually knew how it worked. Because yeah, as we're explaining, it's a magic trick. It's kind of an illusion. Yeah. And you know, I think since I totally am interested in the occult and I believe in magic, so I'm not saying that magic is bad. It's always an illusion, that you can't accomplish anything through the process of, you know, creating an illusion, making people believe in it. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but you know, in our economy, we first there's the magic trick, and then there's, you know, what's actually going on behind the trick, and there's actually wealth being looted from the economy through this process. So you know, it's not just the fact that the money is being created out of nothing, but there's a debt attached to it every single time it's created, and wealth has to be extracted from the economy in order to make up for that debt. And so we're creating money out of nothing magically, but real physical goods and services and, you know, the labor are being extracted in order to make that stuff real, basically. So, and that's why I really get into that in the second book, in Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge. I talk about that, and that's really the second tier of metaphor here. As you know, in alchemy, there's all of this stuff about okay, seriously, grinding up and eating babies. I mean, you know, and it's so complicated because there's so many different alchemical texts and so many different metaphorical schemes being used in each text. But one thing that I found as I was looking through them is this thing keeps popping up over and over again, that the source of the prima materia that is transformed into gold is blood, and specifically the blood of children, and then it needs to be processed in the burned up in the Athanor and transformed, and then it becomes the Philosopher's Stone, or it becomes gold. And in the book, I've basically said that this is an important aspect of alchemy. In fact, it's an important aspect of all religion and all magic. I mean, there's always this sacrificial element to it, and the original sacrifice, the basis of all religion, in my opinion, is child sacrifice, and specifically the sacrifice of the king's firstborn child. And so, I go through the book and sort of explain how metaphorically you can see this all over the place, because the way our economic system is built now, okay, we create this money out of nothing, but there's, like I said, there's a debt attached to it. There's a bond created that someone buys, and in some cases it's our own government that buys it, or it's the Federal Reserve that buys it through offshore banks, and so then, like I said, you have to do something to make up for that. And there's an interest rate attached to it. And, with compound interest, of course, you were getting charged interest on the interest that you were charged last month, it just gets bigger and bigger, and to the point where there's not enough stuff on Earth to actually pay for it anymore. And that's happening. And so what happens is you have to not only borrow against the labor and property of the present generation, but very quickly you have to start doing that to the future generations. So here you are feeding off of the youth, and sacrificing them. I mean, and literally to the point where, there are people that won't be born because their parents couldn't afford to have them. Or, in the third world, people could have their children and not afford to feed them because of the fluctuations in price of food that are entirely connected to the price of the dollar. So, I really get into that in the book and show how, this whole system is made up and artificial and magical and illusory. But in order to make the magic work, because people don't really believe that something can be made out of nothing, you have to attach some sort of value to it, right? And that has to come from people's labor and their children's labor. And so there's several alchemical symbols and images that I connected to this idea. I already described the baby cooking and eating, but in addition to that, there's this interesting symbol that shows up in the Book of Abraham the Jew, an alchemical text, and also several others, where it shows Saturn having Saturn or Kronos, and with his scythe, and he's cutting off the feet of Mercury. There's a stage in the alchemical process, of course, because the Mercury is like the agent that does the transforming, right?
The solvent,
And there's this point at which you have to fix the Mercury, and it's symbolized as cutting off the feet of Mercury, so hobbling him so that he can't move. And then they talk about how trapping him in a jar, imprisoning him. They call him the servus fugitivus, and that if you don't, he's a wily
he's a
character.
Thief.
So you got to be careful. You got to trap him. Well, okay, I definitely saw some metaphors here with this forced sacrifice of the youth in the economic system, and then just the fact that it basically represents the imprisonment and thus enslavement of people.
And Saturn represents death, and Saturn Kronos also he eats his own children to perpetuate his own immortality, right?
Oh yeah, and that's another panel, another image in the Book of Abraham the Jew is Saturn eating his children they actually show it and call it. It's called it's alluded to that this is the same as the massacre of the innocents. And Nicholas Flamel, the person who wrote that, wrote an interpretation of it, discovered it and reprinted it. At his what do you call it? His apartments outside of where he lived in Paris. He had paid a lot of money that he made supposedly through alchemy to sort of decorate and redesign this cemetery outside of where he lived, and also like the walls on the building of where he lived. And there you can find he's actually put some images from the Book of Abraham the Jew in there. And there's this image of Saturn eating his children, except it's described as Herod and the massacre of the innocents. So he's drawing this parallel here again, saying that all of these symbols, massacre of the innocents, Saturn eating his children, and then the alchemical process itself are all connected. They're all representations of the same thing.
Yeah, and it also represents the death and rebirth ritual of secret societies as well. It's death and rebirth, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the most basic way of getting initiated into anything.
Now, what about the idea of, we're talking about commerce, we're talking about people sacrificing their children to the system because they have to financially. What about the idea, if we're talking about a death and rebirth ritual on a mass scale with many people involved, like sort of a macrocosmic social death and rebirth ritual? Is that what this is?
I think that is happening on in a certain way, and that's where I actually, at a certain point in the book, I started talking about the concept of the Matrix. Coming from the movie, but also, and I talked about where the word matrix comes from, and of course it's it's the mother goddess basically.
Yeah.
And there's in alchemical texts there's this image occasionally they use of they call it the matrix, and it's like a matrix of different athanors with different substances boiling in them, transforming, and that's kind of. Okay, and I'm really getting metaphorical and mystical here, but
that's all right. No problem.
I just sort of think that our economy is a representation. Like Hermes said, "As above, so below." It's reflecting the larger cosmological order and relationship between its parts. So I speculate that this whole system is happening on a larger scale. Cosmically, and so I kind of agree with Gnostics, or I tend towards that, in that they were kind of paranoid, and they kind of thought that we're living in some sort of prison created by outside intelligences, and that they're feeding off of us, that we're part of their food chain. And I kind of think that is happening in a cosmic way, and I think it's just being reflected here on Earth in our political and economic system.
Huh. Interesting.
So we're all being processed. Yeah, see, that's the thing. We're all part of the process. We're all being processed.
Yeah.
We're all a battery being used to make this machine work. And the thing is, excuse me. Yes, there's individuals, families, individuals profiting from this personally, and they're kind of behind it. But really, the government and the banking system, the system itself is an intelligence. It's
yes.
The whole thing about a corporation is something created by fiat. It's like a Frankenstein. It's like a homunculus or a golem. You create it and give it life through your illocutionary declaration, and then it's alive. It's legally a person. And but the thing is that it doesn't have any conscience. It doesn't have a human will. It's programmed like a robot would be programmed to follow its corporate statutes, and of course to collect profit. And in my opinion, the government is a corporation as well. All governments are corporations. The international monetary system and the IMF that controls it, that's a corporation as well. We we're giving life to this system that, you could think of it as the beast.
Yeah.
The beast is in control now, and the people that are part of it that are responsible for making it happen, I don't even think they're in control anymore.
No. Yeah. This is I love this concept because I really agree with you on this. I've come to the same conclusion that corporations, governments, all these things are macrocosmic entities, and they're even explained as such. They've even, as you say, the corporations have gone to the extent that they've won their legal personhood. So it's almost like an entity coming to life at a macrocosmic scale, and this sort of ties back into the mystic tradition with the idea of Adam Kadmon. This sort of like the fall of man was when he separated himself from this macrocosmic divinity that he once was. Is this creation of these macrocosmic entities, being governments, corporations, financial institutions, is this a way of trying to regain Paradise Lost unity?
That it's sort of taking the energy is taking it upon itself to create this system as out of some desire to reunify.
Yeah. Do you think that we're trying to become the Adam before the fall, basically, to regain that lost estate?
I don't know. I hadn't thought of that. Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of get the feeling that we're, if we're talking just cosmically, what's going on. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I theorized at one point, what if, what if you're an entity on the outside of everything?
Sure.
If you're Adam Kadmon before the fall, okay, which in my opinion is before time, right? Because when they separated and the fall happened, generation and birth and death and sex were created at that moment. And so there was no time before that. And so what if you're Adam Kadmon, you're outside of time, you have everything inside of you, the whole universe is you, and but the thing is, you have so much information to process, to try to think about, and nothing to bounce it off of, and it's like chaos, so much is happening all at once. And so what you need is someone else to help you process it. You need a slave. You need someone, you need a system, and create a box in which you can have time, the flow of time and movement through space, just and intellectual thinking beings within it, just to process that information, to help you do the thinking, to help you do the existing. And so maybe that's what we are, we're and go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. The black box would be the cube of Saturn, right? And Saturn is death, and time brings about death, so that's all the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. Yes. Time is death, and Saturn is the king of that.
Yeah, totally.
But well, can I? Since we only have a few minutes left, I'd love to connect to the concept of the golden age with Saturn.
Oh, please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We're talking about the time before time. In the Bible, it just sort of has the Garden of Eden story. With the Greeks, they had several different versions of it, but they had these stories about how there used to be this golden age. There were these series of ages, basically ruled by different races of man, and each race is a devolution from the golden age race that existed in what seems to be, from the descriptions, a time before time, a time of paradise when no one was working, no one had to work, there was no money, and there was a king, though, and the king who was ruling over this was Saturn, but he was called the Lord of Misrule, the one who does not rule, and basically that, he was in charge, but he wasn't forcing anyone to do anything. But as we know, then there's the story of, he was eating his children. That's how he maintained his power. That's how this primordial state stayed the way it was because instead of the children being born, right, instead of having sex and death and generation, the children were being kept inside. That's why you had the story of Saturn eating the children, and then before that, the previous generation of gods, because Saturn came from other gods, and his mother, the Earth, at one point she was actually having her children forced back into her womb to prevent them from being born. Okay, this is all a metaphor for this idea that in order to preserve this perfect state of peaceful anarchy that Saturn represented, you had to prevent the future from occurring. You had to sacrifice the children. So, I think it's just so interesting. It's like there's so many metaphors and mythological connections that can be made here. And then you think about it, okay, Saturn became Santa Claus, and which, if you think about it, Christmas is very much tied into the way our economic system works, right? You basically, if a business owner, you're in the red until Christmas when you're supposed to make all your money back.
Yeah.
But then there's this other thing where the cap that Saturn wore, the red cap of liberty that was his crown. Well, that became the liberty cap that was sort of a symbol of revolution in the French Revolution, and then it's even used in the seal of the U.S. Senate now. It's a symbol of revolution and to a lot of people anarchy, and it's just interesting to think well, where did that really come from? And it came from this story about Saturn.
Yeah, that's amazing because alchemy again is. The search for the elixir of life, the gaining of immortality, and this whole idea is, the cheating of time, of death. And to cheat death, you have to sort of become like Saturn and eat your own children and prevent new life from being regenerated, and instead regenerate yourself so you can keep existing yourself. Is that an element to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when alchemists talk about the elixir of life, as the goal of the alchemical process, and you're creating something that you ingest so that you can live forever, again, they're talking about consuming the flesh of infants and the blood of infants in order to maintain your own youth. And of course, this is something that is practiced in folk magic all over the world and throughout history. Just think about if you've heard of the Chinese and the underground habit of eating fetus soup to make yourself younger. And of course, Elizabeth Bathory, the blood countess in Austria, she used to or Hungary, she used to bathe in blood. And I mean, that's the fountain of youth is a bloodbath, and that's what it means. And in alchemy, they refer to this as the bath of the stars, and they talk about all of the noble metals being represented as children that have to be drawn down and then put into this bath, which a boiling cauldron, basically.
Now, to bring this into the mundane sphere and a current perspective. I've seen this idea. People on YouTube, of course, go on YouTube and they say, I feel this is my opinion. I'm blah blah blah, and they say whatever. They have their ideas. I've seen this trend on YouTube of the concept of anti-natalism, which is basically this group of people saying we should stop having babies because there's all this suffering in the world. It would be better if we stopped reproducing. I see sort of the rise of ideas like this all around us now, which would be considered completely radical ideas like 20 years ago, but now it's seeping out into the mainstream. I feel as though it's a consequence of this philosophical of this whole, we're talking about alchemy. I feel like it's actually come out of that, and the people who are espousing these ideas are none the wiser. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, everyone has been, everyone feels like there isn't enough resources on the planet. I think that's certainly arguable, but that's the way everyone feels. And I think that's because of what's going on in the economy, where there's this wealth being extracted from it. And yet, because of inflation, people might still have the same number of dollars, but it's not buying as much. There's this unconscious feeling that everything's shrinking, everything's being taken away from you, but most people can't put their finger on what's actually happening. And so they think, oh my God, there's not enough oil, there's not enough food, we're a cancer upon the earth and we need to limit the number of people. Of course, it's ridiculous because everything about the economy, as I've been explaining, is completely dependent upon having children. So if you stop having children, it's not very long until everyone's dead. Obviously, not only because there's not a future generation, but there's not even a present generation of workers to pay the pensions of the people from the previous generation. Yeah. So, again, it's so ridiculous. Yes, people have this. It's so cool now to, basically hate children. And, I can understand. I hate it when I go into an airplane or a restaurant and there's a screaming kid, but in reality, we were all that kid once. And, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. It seems, it's strange, but I mean, it's definitely a real phenomenon. And
oh, yeah.
This whole misanthropic reality seems to be just popping up, but again, it's not out of nowhere. I really feel that way. And in terms of the search for a literal elixir of life, like immortality, are you aware of life extension and these ideas of like Ray Kurzweil and characters like that?
I'm not at all familiar with that name, and I haven't read any of the books, any of the. No, I mean I know that there are life extension technologies. So yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, do you think like the search for literal life extension, could that be an example of high alchemy, like trying to actually gain immortality?
Yes, and see, I think that this whole concept needs to be understood so that we can put it in its proper place. Okay, yeah. This ritual of alchemy that we've described, this is how magic works. This is how creation works. And so you have to go through this process somehow in order to create any sort of transformation. It's just a matter of, who do you want to be the sacrifice? Who do you want to have to pay the price and bear the burden of the change you're trying to create? And so, I think that there's ways of going about it without actually sacrificing real children. Yeah. And as far as whether there can be actual transformation of the human race, for sure. And in fact, I think if you were to fix the economic system, and by fixing it, I just mean stop the government monopolies on currency, because basically if you had competition, if it was legal to have any other form of currency, you would the whole monopoly would be broken up. People would start using currencies that are more reliable, and the problem goes away. So if you could do that, I think that you could have a race of humans living a lot longer and having much different abilities, better physical abilities, because the thing right now is that, you've got all this great medical technology happening, but who can afford it? Only a few people can afford it. And really, I mean, it's so great. Yeah. We pat ourselves on the back for our technological process, but 90% of the world's population is still starving. Okay, so we're not there yet. And the problem is distributing these technologies. And, in my opinion, all of this inequality, I'm not saying everyone would be equal. What I'm saying is that the vast distortion of what seems to be, at least an organic or natural social order is happening because of this wealth extraction that's occurring through our fake alchemical process in the economy. So, yeah, I mean, I totally think that if everyone had access to medicine and medicine could continue to expand and progress, that humanity could be so much different in the future.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of like the strange twisted point here. You talk about how somebody has to bear the burden in this whole process, and we're talking about an actual attempt at immortality. Well, if you were to actually achieve that, the people who would achieve that would by default become the Saturn character, because they end up not having children because they regenerate themselves. But at the same time, what the old system sort of did away with, the old system would fall, but they would rise up out of it, sort of like the Phoenix idea. And I don't know, I'm getting kind of mixed up there with that.
No, I think that's a good point. That's something, to think about if you did have a, superhuman race like that, is that, statistically people tend to have fewer children when, their economic situation rises. But, and then there's a point at which that falls off too, because at a certain point when things get so bad economically in a country that had previously been prosperous, then people do kind of tend to stop having children because they can't afford them. But, for the most part, the large birth rates are in countries that are extremely poor. So, it will be interesting to see, if that were to happen, how many children would people tend to have, or any, you're right. Maybe people just wouldn't have that need anymore.
Yeah. I feel like that's the point. Like we're being led, like this alchemical process is an attempt at enlightening the world. And when somebody's enlightened, they become more intelligent and they find a way to regenerate themselves. And this kind of gets in, they have the intelligence to not breed anymore, because, and this is sort of the rise of the whole, it all ties together. Am I making sense? Does this make sense at all?
No, I think that's, again, an interesting thing to think about what would happen, because, of course, a big part of alchemy is, what is this alchemical child that you're creating? It's a hermaphrodite. The alchemical transformation is really symbolized by this figure of the hermaphrodite. Once you transcend the divisions, you don't need to, you're beyond sex. You don't personally have a sex anymore, and you don't need to have sex with another person. So, even Jesus said that when you ascend to heaven, you're no longer married. People don't get married, people don't have sex. So it'll be interesting if we actually sort of became semi-divine beings like that.
Sure.
Would we even want to have sex anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, this is so strange, because it's about the use of ideas, like these mystic ideas and allegories, but actually is the alchemical process, is high alchemy taking those, like the idea of the hermaphrodite, and actually hardening it in the material realm? Is this what the alchemist literally wants to become, like bringing heaven down to earth?
Well, yeah, some of them do, I think. And then, some of them want to go to heaven from here, like Count de Saint Germain supposedly, used the alchemical powder to dissolve himself and disappear, and then you got, I think the cyclic cross of Hinde is interesting. I think that there's an alchemical message buried on this cross of Hinde, which is in France. And basically they say that, there's a country, there's a place somewhere where you can go to escape the end of the world when it happens. And that alchemists know where to go. Well, I think that we're talking about another dimension here. We're talking about this, we're talking about going outside of the box, right? We're talking about maybe this universe is a matrix and we're imprisoned within it. Well, alchemists, maybe they know how to get out.
Wow.
They know how to go to the other side, and maybe on the other side, there's no longer sexual division. So what happens when you go there? I don't know.
Yeah, there's just so many ways to interpret this, and I really feel that, in our world, we're led to believe that, there's only one given answer to every question. I really feel that the many different interpretations to these questions, they're all valid in their own way, and that there's no one correct answer. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, that's the one thing that I've definitely learned through my study of the esoteric, Hermeticism and alchemy, is all of these things have multiple layers of meaning, and the symbols all connect to one another, and the meanings all connect to one another
Yeah.
in a very complicated way. That's just, that's what's so beautiful about it. I mean, that's what I love about myth and mysticism and symbolism, is that it has all these multiple layers of meaning. When you're trying to explain it to other people that don't necessarily have that understanding, it can be very difficult because you get people arguing with you. And well, I heard it was this, or no, it makes sense that it's this way, and you say, yeah, it's that too, and then they're like, oh, well, you're just, you think that everything is true, or you're just trying to, be all things to all people. Well, no, I mean, that's really what the Hermetic philosophy is it's all things to all people. And, the more adept you are at applying metaphor and myth to reality, the more you can see all of these levels of symbolism. So, I think, yeah, that's just a person with a mundane mindset thinks that there's one explanation of what the Holy Grail is, or what alchemy is, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how the human mind works. There's infinite possibility. It's like the mystery of the subjective life, too.
Oh, well, yeah, of course, yeah. Everyone chooses which meanings that they're going to attach to things, to the exclusion usually of the other meanings, and then they think all the other people are wrong. And Hermetic philosophy is all about layers of reality, all reflecting the same pattern. So, as above, so below, and below that, so below, and below that, and below that. It just everything in the universe, in my opinion, reflects the same pattern, and I think that alchemy is the best way to describe it, really. We have this scientific understanding of cause and effect that explains supposedly everything that happens in the universe, but with just about every process that you're trying to explain, at some point, there's that supernatural spark of alchemical transpiration that you have to just write in as the X factor that you don't.
Yeah, and then also the scientists can choose to take the liberty to just fill in the blank there and be like, oh, this is why it happens. And when you fill in that blank, then you create a fixed reality, do you not?
Oh yeah. Okay. We've explained how the universe was created, and it's not God, it's the Big Bang. Okay. Well, you just replace the word God with Big Bang. You accomplish nothing. So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of humorous in a way when you really get down to this level.
Yeah, it is. But when you're talking about economics with people, there's a certain amount of, I guess, importance, or I kind of feel like we're in an emergency situation here.
True, yeah.
It's like I really want people to understand what I'm talking about, and one of the reasons why I want them to understand is because I think you have to get out of this myopic mindset that, you either have the system we have now, or you have a gold standard, or you have this or that. I think that if you don't understand the alchemy and how it works, then you can't utilize that alchemy for good purposes either, and
Sure.
Plus you get sucked in to the same thing. I mean, like right now, what's going on? The Tea Party has been co-opted. They're trying to push Ron Paul out of the race, who wanted to audit the Fed and get rid of the Fed. Mm-hmm. And instead, they have Michelle Bachmann and now Rick Perry up there talking about the Federal Reserve and trying to act like they're going to carry that water. They're going to be the ones to fight the Fed. Well, and they may accomplish this. Here's the problem, is that this is exactly how the Federal Reserve came about in the first place. It was supposedly an answer to the control of the economy by private corporate banks.
That's right, yeah.
And so this was going to put that control in the hands of the government. Well, what that really did was just put the government in the hands of this private bank completely. And so now what they're trying to do is say, okay, we're gonna fight the Fed. We're gonna get rid of the Fed. Well, if you don't understand what's bad about the Fed, or you don't understand how the magic trick works, then you're just going to get sucked into another system that does the same thing.
That's right. It may not be David Copperfield. It may be a different magician, but it's still the same old trick.
Yeah. And then there's another thing is that you have to respect the trick too. You have to respect the magic and realize that anything you're going to do with money is going to involve that magic. It's going to involve that alchemy because like I say in my books, alchemy didn't just start with the Federal Reserve. I mean, there's been magic associated with money since the very beginning when it was invented in the temples of Ishtar to pay the temple prostitutes. It's always been associated with religious sacrifice and alchemy, alchemical transformation. So, you have to understand this and respect it if you're going to even create an alternative to the existing system.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Tracy, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This is wonderful. And before you go, I need you to let the listeners know where to find you, what books you have available now, what you want them to read, how they can get a hold of all of your material.
Sure. Well, I guess ground zero for me and my books is tracyrtwyman.com, TracyRtwyman. But, of course, you mentioned the other websites, and you can get to all my stuff there as well. It's all linked together. So there's quintessentialpublications.com. There's libertycappress.com. I've got, like you said, 9 or 10 books. Some of them are only ebooks, so you can buy all those through my website. Almost all the ebooks, I believe, are also available on the Kindle on Amazon, and all of my print books are available on Amazon also. So there's many ways to find my stuff. The stuff about economic alchemy is the most recent book, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, and the previous one, Solomon's Treasure. I also wrote several other books like Merovingian Mythos and Antichrist 2012, which is about Prince William. Anyway, there's quite a lot of stuff there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I have not read the books myself, but I am sure that they are amazing. This was a great conversation, and once again, thank you for coming on, Tracy.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, I want to say, Seeker, seek on.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining Shana and I this evening to have a chat. I initially got in touch with you because I'd heard your shows about the origins of money, and I know you'd done a lot of work, and your research had led you down some very interesting paths. So I wondered if you wanted to tell us a little bit about your perhaps your journey to your current project. What led you to this book that you're writing at the moment?
Oh, actually, well, the book that I think we're going to be talking about tonight is already available. So it's Genuflect. It's a novel. It's my first novel. So I've been writing nonfiction up until this point, and I'm not ashamed to say I'm going to be 39 next month. So, I'm not quite 40 yet, but I've been doing this for like over, maybe I would say 23 years is I think the number I came up with last time I thought about it. Because I started when I was a teenager. I started doing lengthy essay type articles for a student newspaper at a college. And that's when I kind of really got serious about this stuff. And then I went on to publish a zine, if you're familiar with that term. Right. Back in the 90s, there used to be, self-published magazines, and they would often be called zines. And so I had a zine when I was 18, and this would have been around, I guess, mid-90s, early mid-90s. So it was all about the phenomenon that later became known and associated with Da Vinci Code. But at the time, the most famous book about that type of subject was Holy Blood, Holy Grail. So I had read that book, and or The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail is, I believe, the title that they had for the initial publication there in England. But anyway, so I had been inspired by that book, and I was already kind of interested in starting to learn about secret societies and occultism, and actually had been writing about that in the context of conspiracy theories about Freemasonry and stuff like that for the newspaper for some time. And when I learned all about that angle on the subject of secret societies and conspiracies, where there was the aspect of the the alleged sacred bloodlines that are to be found in the genealogies of important people both in modern times and in history. Well, that was just like a really eye-opening new way of looking at things for me, because I was already starting to take college courses about the history of Europe and the history of civilization in general, and so learning these, I guess, hidden aspects of history, some of the things that were covered in that book and other similar associated books, just really got me excited, and so I guess I was kind of young, and I don't know what I was thinking back then, but I got this kind of weird idea, like I said, to start a magazine about it. And it was sort of kind of a performance art project really in the beginning, because I was trying to pretend that I had a magazine being published by a secret society, just to get attention. I don't know, just for fun, basically.
That's your angle. That was your angle.
Yeah. And anyway, I ended up, by the time me and some other friends got together to put more effort into it and to do a kind of serious enterprise, we started like doing real in-depth articles about these esoteric subjects, and we combined it with some record reviews and stuff, so we could get distributed in record stores, and that's how the whole thing got started for me. That's how I started to gain kind of national and international audience. Started a website that was associated with that, so that's how I got started. And then when the magazine sort of faded out, I went straight into writing full-length books about the subjects, and that's what I've been doing since. So here we are.
Yeah, it sounds like writing for you isn't necessarily just something that you're passionate about. It's like a compulsion for you. It's something that you need to communicate through that medium.
It's really the only job I've ever had. I've tried. I don't know. I had a wannabe career at one point, trying to bust into the TV business and stuff. And it looks like actually I may find a backdoor way of getting back into it soon. But I don't know. I kind of, after I got my degree in film, and I was already publishing Daggerbert's Revenge, which was that magazine, and starting to write the next book. And I just thought, I could spend my time doing this other stuff, and I'll probably just get sucked into it. And I really don't want to let go of the threads of research that I was doing. I was already starting to, I felt like, learn things and put things together that other people hadn't. I knew all the other authors on the subject of, back then I started off writing about just like specifically the royal bloodlines, the Freemasons, those types of subjects I really kind of focused on, and I wasn't, I guess, aware of, where I wasn't focusing on, I don't know, broader perspective of it. But at any rate, I knew what well, here's the thing. It was okay. If your audience is familiar at all with the Da Vinci Code story, then they talk about the bloodlines, they talk about the Priory of Zion, and then there's also this little village in France that a whole bunch of that story is tied up with. It has to do with this archaeological treasure hunt mystery in Rennes-le-Château, France. And so at the time, there was this little clique of people on the internet who were kind of obsessed with that, and there's some books that were out about it. And so I started. Not only did I have this magazine that was kind of just dealing with general esoteric subjects about secret societies and stuff, but also we were specifically also kind of focused on that mystery, And so I knew all the guys who were writing about that subject, and I had my own theories about it. I felt like my theories were, I was putting together things that the others hadn't figured out. And not only that, it's broader implications. I felt like, I'm figuring out the mysteries of Freemasonry. Well, actually, it's sort of hinting at sort of hidden truths or traditions about ancient man and our origins. The Genesis story, basically. And I was starting to understand that mythology and archetype in a different way than I had before. And I just realized, this is a really serious subject, and I'm doing some important work. I just didn't want to give it up. And I don't know, it ended up becoming my life's work. I've been following this trail ever since. I guess I would call it one trail, because it feels like, one thing leads to another. I went from obsessing about the Uranus-le-Chateau mystery and the bloodlines of the Merovingians, which I wrote a book about, the Merovingian mythos. But that led to all sorts of other things, including contacting spirits to try to do more research about it. And then that opened up, an experience of the paranormal. That was that's a thing in itself. And I wrote a book about that in particular too, clock shavings. That was all about the messages that I got and have been getting throughout the years that have sort of helped with my research. But I went on to really focus on this mystery of the Templars and the demon or spirit that they were accused of worshiping, supposedly in their their secret rituals. And the reason that, that's the reason why they were disbanded and destroyed. And I started focusing on the mystery of what that entity might have been, and what the name meant. And really, I got started on that particular trail, mostly because, like I said, I was doing some Ouija board seances, really kind of on a lark in the beginning, with a friend of mine that I was working with, just to try to get some further information, like an idea that maybe I hadn't thought of about some of the mysteries of, at that time, the Uranus-le-Chateau mystery that we were investigating. So I started off conjuring up some people in regards to that, and I ended up getting contacted by something that I didn't ask for. The Ouija board really worked, by the way. So we did it.
Yeah, I've done some Ouija boards in my time, and they can be terrifying. It's just the way that the things that they can present to you. It's shocking. So I know what you're talking about as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, and I ended up getting contacted by Baphomet himself or herself or whatever you want to call it, but that the entity that the Templars were, I think, involved with, I would say, I believe it's true. They anyway, it talked to me and told me all sorts of things over the years, including things about itself. And even after I let go of the Uranus-le-Chateau mystery and kind of let it rest, I still was intrigued by that, the mystery of Baphomet, I guess I would say, because it seemed to me that this entity could be thought of as a symbol. And I almost feel like I'm putting it in too small of a position to call it a symbol, but basically you could say it's corresponds with the deepest mysteries, I think, of Western esotericism. So I think it really has become sort of the patron saint, if you will, of the modern esoteric orders that I guess are more prominent, or that people think of. People think of Freemasons, and they definitely think of it as a continuation of the Templars. And people, for sure, the OTO and these other Crowley orders think of themselves as continuing a Templar tradition somehow, and they openly invoke Baphomet. So, I felt like, this is really a very important aspect of, Western ceremonial magic and esoteric thought in modern times. That this has had a very, very big impact on it. And so I felt I really needed to research that more. And I did. And, I've been doing it ever since, because it ended up tying in with a bunch of other subjects. So I ended up writing all sorts of books based on the research I did just about that.
You opened up a Pandora's box, basically.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to write a book about Baphomet, because no one really has done that, or had at that time, No one had focused on that mystery in particular. There have been tons of books about the Templars, and almost all of them dismissed the charges against them, right? And then, most of these authors are focusing on whether there's a treasure and trying to connect the secret doctrine of the Templars to, various other spiritual traditions, I guess. But as far as, what is Baphomet, and, not only the question of is it real, but then, what would the word mean? What's the, the genealogy, I guess, of that idea? How did it get created in the first place? Because nothing ever comes out of nothing. Everything has a way that it came about. So anyway, I just decided I really needed to focus on that, and in the process, I ended up analyzing the entire history of money. As you mentioned, I wrote 2 books about the esoteric history of money and the way that the modern economy operates according to alchemical principles. And all of this is really kind of an offshoot of my Baphomet research, because I ended up, we can go into that, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was because I loved the money research. It was the first sort of thing that I ever encountered of your work. I hadn't sort of, I think I can't even remember how long ago that was now that I heard that show. It must have been 6 years ago, maybe. It might have even been more. And I remember listening to it over and over again, because I just loved it so much. I found it so interesting. But to think that that's an offshoot from researching Baphomet is crazy. So obviously the monetary system and that sort of thing has been very influenced, and there's an awful lot of basically everything in society is very influenced by the orders that rule it. And you've got these Masonic Freemasons and that sort of thing. So you said they openly invoke Baphomet these days. What you've done it yourself as well. I'm just curious to know how they access that invocation, what they're applying it to, and what they're hoping to influence. Do you have an opinion on that, or a perspective?
Are we talking about, which group are we talking about specifically? I mean, I think they each have their own ideas about it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I see things. I might be getting a bit carried away here, but I see things like the X Factor and stuff like that on TV, and I can't help but feel that obviously there's so much money in the music industry, and there's so much money channeled into television and keeping the masses entertained. And I feel that there's a certain entity which allows people to be so seduced by that sort of thing. And it's obviously a very powerful tool once you know how to use it. And the Freemasons are obviously, I don't want to make any assumptions here, but the Freemasons are everywhere, different levels of Mason. And, there's people that hold very powerful positions who are in, very in all sorts of industries, but particularly, entertainment industry and things like that. So do you think that they're using that kind of invocation in order to control the masses through what might be considered sinful acts by the Bible, the kind of worshipping false idols type of, X Factor type people and things like that? I'm just curious to know your opinion on that.
Well, I think the topic of what Freemasons think or do is probably very broad, just because each lodge probably has their own traditions. Then you have different, rites and different, different Freemasonic traditions and groups of lodges. So I guess I can only say what I think is sort of the guiding spirit that I would say, is behind probably all of them, because I would say, in my opinion, the Templars were worshiping, or they had a relationship with Baphomet, a contract. He was the the spiritual head of their order, and when they were disbanded, then the Masonic lodges that popped up later in history after that were continuing the tradition. So what I would say is that there's definitely a, like I said, guiding spirit, and I would imagine that, yes, there's lots of high-ranking Masons at the heads of lodges that are actually in contact with Baphomet and other spirits that are, actively making deals with that entity, and then doing some kind of plan according to that deal. Wow. I think only Baphomet himself would know what the grand plan is, and then the vast majority of rank and file Masons probably don't know anything about it. And really, when you talk to these guys, I know plenty of them. I would say about half of them are in the state of kind of denial, and they can only state apologetics arguments that they've memorized of trying to sort of demystify Freemasonry. And they see they would think that acknowledging Baphomet is real as something that reflects negatively on them. So mostly they don't want to admit it, and I would say mostly they don't even know that. In other words, they believe this is really the standard line. This is what mainstream academia still believes, even though documents have been released in recent years that prove otherwise. But mainstream thought still is that the Templars were victims, and that everything that was said about them was made up. That they were just Christians, and they crossed the King of France the wrong way, and they ended up crispy Templars. But in reality, I don't see any reason to doubt the confessions that they made. And I don't want to get into all the details, but since I'm answering another question, but there was a document released just a few years ago called the Chinon Parchment that verifies that they confessed all these things a second time without torture to the Pope himself. So
wow,
I don't see any reason why we have to be, bend over backwards, I guess, mentally to try to give these guys a pass. And instead, I think it's much more anthropologically useful to look at the influence that the idea of Baphomet might have had on, yes, the order of Freemasonry, and then all sorts of other things. I mean, one of the things we argued, my co-author Alex Rivera and I, in one of my most recent books, which is Baphomet: The Temple Mystery Unveiled. I did eventually write the book about Baphomet, the definitive book about Baphomet, and we end up kind of saying that modern Satanism and movements that resemble, or maybe they don't call themselves Satanism, but they essentially are. And I would put the OTO and other curly groups in that category. The ideas and practices of modern Satanists are very much influenced by the accusations that were made against the Templars. And up until the release of the Chinon Parchment, it had not been proven in the eyes of most historians that the Templars were actually guilty of anything. So up until a few years ago, it seemed that these practices of satanic groups, and what I'm talking about is ritually kissing a goat, for instance, to sort of emulate what the Templars were accused of doing in their Baphomet rituals. So, and the Church of Satan, for instance, openly uses Baphomet's picture, a picture of a goat face, and they use his name. And then the OTO and all of the curly books openly, or orders, curly orders, openly invoke Baphomet. So, and there's, I could go into a lot of other details about how they're emulating the rights of the rights that the Templars were accused of, and they're also emulating the OTO is emulating Masonic rights that are themselves written to invoke the imagery of the Templars. All of this is showing that the alleged practices of the Templars are being emulated by modern satanic groups today, even if it's believed that those practices were never actually being done by the Templars. So up until, like I said, up until a few years ago, most people thought the Templars didn't actually do these things, but modern Satanists now do it, kind of as an homage, to the Freemasons. But I think it's more than that. I think that for one thing, the Templars were doing it, and for another thing, it's not just an homage. It's not just kind of a joke. They're really continuing the tradition. So they really are a continuation of the Templars. I would say, spiritually and otherwise, the OTO is continuing the tradition of the Templars.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting, and it's one of those things that as you said, this document that proves that they've confessed twice and come out and said these things. It's that's quite strong evidence that they actually did those things. But I fear that we've actually digressed hugely, because you actually wanted to talk about your latest book that you're writing about, which is your fiction book, Genuflect.
We didn't digress at all, because it's all about the same stuff.
Excellent. Well, it's coming into it. I felt like I was steering you off to talk about all the previous work that you've done, but actually brings us into this book. So what was it that inspired you to take a step from nonfiction to fiction?
Well, for years, people have been telling me to do this, and I've been getting attention from people in the TV and movie businesses, where they kind of want to do stuff with me, but since I haven't actually written any published fiction, they can only do documentary shows, which nobody really makes a lot of money at. Anyway, so I can do that, and then the other thing is we can utilize some of your ideas for fiction, but what ends up happening is they just take the ideas, and I don't end up getting a paycheck or a byline or anything. Yeah. So I've been thinking for a while, no, I should just write a book that, tells the whole story. And that way, instead of lifting my ideas, it'll actually just be easier to buy the script or, buy the rights to make a script. And so then, lo and behold, someone a few months ago, and I won't name who he is, but someone, who's pretty well known in the movie business, talked to me and said, "Hey, I like what you do, and can you write a synopsis for me of a movie that you'd like to see based on the kinds of things that you write about?" And it should have been so easy, and I should have just done that. But for some reason, I sat down and I started writing what was supposed to be a movie synopsis, and I ended up just writing the entire novel. And, but it wasn't an accident or anything, because it ended up taking 9 months. But wow. I found there's no way I could write this story in a thumbnail sketch and have the person understand what I'm talking about, So I have to write 9 months.
That's a real period of gestation, isn't it? You've birthed this project.
Well, it took, yes, exactly. Yeah. 9 months from writing out a little, outline to actually publishing it. Wow. Which isn't actually bad, if you compare it to.
That's very good going.
Sometimes you spend 5 or 10 years writing a book, so I thought that was pretty good. And it ended up just being way deeper and bigger and better, and it's so much more than what I had intended. And I still haven't written the synopsis for the movie, but now I've got another person asking me for the same thing, so I'm actually gonna do it tonight, and hopefully we'll have a movie contract by the end of the week. Who knows? Probably not. I guess
you could say that you're probably really one of the best people ever at procrastinating. Rather than write that synopsis, you'd write a whole book.
No, again, it's more like I have to explain what I'm talking about, and maybe it takes 500 pages to do that. Yeah. So, but now that I have that, I can write a synopsis, and if people need more detail, they can just refer to the manuscript. See, so it makes it easier, I think, to sell it, because it really would have if I just tried to explain this weird story to someone in 3 pages, and I couldn't show them the actual story. I don't think it would have worked. So I think I did the right thing. It was the most hard thing I've ever done. Okay, really? Because like nonfiction, you can just choose which facts you want to present. You decide what range of the subject you want to cover, and you're dealing with the subjects that are your subject matter that you're already an expert on, right? To deal with nonfiction or fiction and to not get made fun of by the audience, you have to know all sorts of details about all sorts of things you never wanted to think about, like geography and, when that business is going to be open at a certain time of day and just every imaginable thing. So a lot of the last 9 months, or me, for instance, looking at Google Earth, because the whole thing takes place in London, which I've been to a couple of times, but I don't remember everything that well. So I've been camping on Google Earth for a large portion of the 9 months, and I'm pretty sure that they probably think I'm a terrorist from all the sites that I keep looking at. But anyway, I spent a lot of time looking at the geography of specifically the borough of the city of London, within Greater London. And that's where everything takes place.
It's got rich esoteric symbolism all over the buildings. The architecture is amazing. The city itself is just an incredible place to walk around. Don't look at the ground. Look up at the buildings. It's amazing. Have you literally done a tour of it and just on Google Earth and just checked out some of the architecture?
Well, yeah, that's what I've been doing, and so I ended up. There's a bunch of different places that are used as scenes, but the place that is the main location where all the the climactic stuff happens, and in the last half of the book, is based on this real location that isn't quite open yet. But it's the building that Michael Bloomberg is about to open. That's going to be right next to the Bank of England and right next to the Rothschilds building.
Oh, wow.
And they're moving the Temple of Mithras that has been sitting in the middle of the sidewalk for decades. And they're going to move it. They have moved it back to its original location. It's ancient Temple of Mithras. And, they refurbished it. From my understanding, from what I read on Bloomberg's site, this is the largest building in London in terms of mass.
Wow.
So it's this huge construction project, and they found tons of new archaeological stuff when they dug under the building again.
Oh, wow.
So, there's lots of, history that's been made, including the oldest written artifacts in Britain they found there. So they actually named them the Bloomberg tablets. So he gets to have his name in a piece of history now. So anyway, so I used this building as inspiration for a fictional building that is pretty close to the reality in terms of the way it looks and the way things function inside the building. I based my fictional building very much on the reality, but then I allowed myself a little bit of room for imagination, I guess. And I also based my villain on Michael Bloomberg, although again it was a very transformed version. And my villain does a lot of bad things that I'm not saying Michael Bloomberg actually does at all. So just to get that out of the way, I'm not saying Bloomberg actually is a child rapist or murderer, but that's just I needed.
Well, I was going to just touch on that actually, because your book does come with a bit of a warning when you go onto your website, doesn't it? It does say that there are some rather graphic scenes in there, or some really emotive content, I should say, really. You felt that you had to warn people against this. Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, because my reputation. I mean, I do get into, definitely prurient details of history and about esoteric secrets of sex magic, for instance, things like that. That's stuff that people are used to from me in my nonfiction novels, but or my nonfiction books. But no one's ever read a rape scene written by me before. So yeah. I gotta warn the people who might be just buying this book because they love Tracy Twyman. Well, I want you to buy the book, but if this is something you can't handle, then I just want to let you know ahead of time, because that's the subject we're dealing with. It's I mean, a lot of people who've read it already compare it in some ways to Desaad, but I don't have the same kind of viewpoint and moral standing on it that Desaad had, where he thought it was a good thing. So yeah, it's pretty hardcore. This is not 50 Shades of Grey. This is way darker than that.
It's a larger gradient, definitely.
Yes.
So that's I mean, you're obviously touching on subjects which coming from the perspective that we do, and having done my own research into perhaps some of the more high profile cases, like in the UK. I don't know if you heard about Oputry, but there was a lot of stuff going on with the BBC and with did you ever hear of Jimmy Savile? I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was a television personality, an entertainer who'd been around for years, and he was a bit of a weird character. I mean, most people would look at, I think a lot of people from the US had seen a picture of him when all this stuff came out and went, oh my God, that guy's blatantly a paedophile. I think he was a bit of a character that would invoke a bit of a strong reaction from most people. Either they really couldn't tolerate him, or they thought, oh, he's amazing, he's lovely, because he did so much work for charity. But it kind of, there's obviously openly sort of accepted now, and common knowledge that in higher levels of the entertainment industry, where there's people that are considered to be untouchable, there is that kind of thing going on. Jimmy Savile was a Mason, and he was involved in. He's considered to be one of the most prolific sex offenders or sexual predators that has been known to this country. So this is a guy who has contact with the Pope and with the Queen, very closely in contact with the royal family. So I'm not sure if you've ever encountered him in any of your research at all, but this is a guy that had a lot of contacts. So it's obviously something that is very it's a subject that I'm very interested in, and I've looked into it a lot. But it's something that crosses over to Masonry, or at least this crosses over to very powerful people and heads of some of these organisations, which you've obviously touched on in your book. Which I suppose, when I mention these subjects, it has a strong effect on people. Some people just don't want to hear about it, and they go, "Oh, can you stop talking about that?" But it's a real thing. It is a real thing. So I guess dressing it up as a fiction book and going into detail in the way that you have is a good way to discuss some of this stuff, some of this content.
Yeah, I've been. I intended when I came up with the idea of doing a fiction story at all, and that was immediately the one of the topics I wanted to deal with. I've written about that before. I had a book called Mind Controlled Sex Slaves in the CIA. So I've definitely have delved into the subject before of how the intelligence industry, I guess you would call it, they utilize this process of compromising people, not only in positions of political power or economic power, people in important positions in big companies, but even, as you were mentioning, people in the entertainment industry, people who are just celebrities. An amazing number of them have been surreptitiously recorded having some kind of illegal sex with a prostitute, usually an underage child or something like that.
Yeah.
And that this is a sort of rite of passage, it seems, in order to get into certain levels of, the elite, the certain places, areas of control. That they only hire people who have these kinds of proclivities. And the reason why is because they want to be able to blackmail them. They want to be able to control them. So, I would have, when I first wrote a book about this, which was like maybe 2004, I think, it was still was just a conspiracy theory mostly. It was known a little bit that, for instance, orphanages in Europe would sometimes be used. The children would be used to compromise people. There have been scandals here and there that had popped up, but it wasn't as widely known or acknowledged as, for instance, now. Yes, when you have so many high-profile cases popping up in England with the Dolphin Square and all that stuff, and then then in the United States, well, a few years ago we had the guy Jerry Sandusky who was running the football program at Penn State. That was a big scandal, and that kind of opened people's eyes to the fact that this is institutionalized. But then, right in time for my book, corresponding with this around the same time that I'm writing my book, a huge scandal opened up in the United States, which has been turned into basically has just been dismissed and considered a what they call fake news. What's the old term for this?
Is this Pizzagate you're talking about?
Yes, PG.
Oh gosh, are we not allowed to say it?
Dear, look, seriously. Look, you can say it if you want. Go ahead, but if you put that in like the meta tags for this podcast, you may notice that it doesn't get the same kind of traction that your previous podcast would. Well, that's because the algorithms on all the major social media sites are suppressing it. That's one of the words you're not allowed to use. Yes, it's something you're not allowed to talk about. I mean, I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know if those accusations are true, but I can't help but notice when website after website literally goes down, they shut down entire segments of Reddit, and they have a huge, subject like this that you're not allowed to talk about in any form whatsoever. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. So knowing what I knew about this subject, I just felt like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire for sure.
Exactly. That is one of the biggest things for me that tells me that there's something not right about this. If they just ignored it and let people talk, people would run out of steam. But instead, they're shutting people down. And that makes me think, well, what are they trying to hide?
Did you see,
it's awful.
Did you see Alex Jones making the apology to James Alefantis maybe about a month ago?
I didn't actually. Okay. I've heard about it. Oh gosh, because there was a whole thing on Twitter about that, wasn't there? There was this whole letter from James Alefantis about this. Yeah, did you see that letter that they printed? They put around on Twitter.
I've seen the letter, and then it was amazing to me when I heard that he had done this, and so I had to watch it for myself. And watching the video, it's just like watching a hostage making a forced statement. I mean, you can see the terror in his eyes, and I'm not. I know he's a controversial figure. A lot of people don't like the way he presents himself and stuff like that. But I mean, you just to be familiar with this guy and his shtick for all these years, and he's usually so fearless, and then to see him have to do that, I just thought, wow, these guys. Pizza parlor owner in Washington, D.C. is really quite powerful, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. If he's having the president over for parties, I mean, well, he's obviously got some sort of persuasion over there, hasn't he?
Yes. So I can only speak in general terms, I guess, because I don't want to get embroiled in any legal battles over making libel statements. Plus, I don't have anything for you. I mean, it's like I don't. Necessarily trust any of the rumors I've heard in particular, but I would say the general idea I think is true, and I think that the information that came out, not just with Pizzagate, but like once the subject was broached, all sorts of people came out with, oh, remember this story, remember that story, and the whole mosaic of information kind of came together for people who were paying attention, and you see, oh, this is how what they call the deep state is run. It's this blackmail system, and I don't think it's coincidental that it goes along with the kinds of rituals that take place in some of these secret societies that I've been talking about.
Absolutely.
There's particular reasons which I write about for the Templars and then all of the Neo-Templar groups for participating in these sex rituals that I think are quite dark. And I feel that they, well, as I say in the book, I think that there's an aim to create some kind of cosmic damage to the universe as a whole by doing these types of rituals. But in addition to that, which is something that would only be understood by people who are in those groups and probably only the highest among them. But it's that became, I think, the inspiration. Those kinds of serious secret sex magic orders became the inspiration for this broader, more broadly utilized approach to running men's clubs and then using those to run the elite of society by making it like, oh, well, if you want to be part of our social group, then you have to go and do these weird sex things with us. It's normal. It's a rite of passage. We all do it. And, so now it is quite normal. I mean, if you join a fraternity at a college, then you'll be put through some weird gay sex stuff. And, it's like expected somehow. And I don't know what exactly the history of college fraternity pranks is, but it seems to me like it goes along with the types of traditions that I'm talking about. Well, I wouldn't doubt if the Templars inspired the Freemasons. The Freemasons then have these less rapey, but still very homoerotic pranks that they do. Well, the joke really is we're anally raping you is the joke still when they're inducting you into the Freemasons. And then so you have similar practices being done by other groups that I think have, perhaps indirectly just been inspired by that, such as college fraternities and other fraternal groups.
But even in the army, when you join the army and they have to break you down psychologically, there's an element of, sort of fracturing the psyche slightly. And that's what happens when they're doing this sort of thing. They're literally making you more suggestible to what they need you to do. So it's broken down in lots of different ways, and even management techniques in offices and that can be associated if they're used in a not say a negative way, but if you've got a manager who's likely to take advantage of you, if you're going to be that type of person. So it's something that's fed down into lots of different areas. It's just the type of people that how they want to control you, really. But I'm aware that I'm running away with the conversation here, and there is another person on the show. So Shana, I'm so sorry that I just get carried away, and I could talk forever on this subject. It's something I'm very interested in. Do you have any comments that you want to make, or is there anything you want to ask Tracy?
Yeah, definitely. I have been enjoying the conversation that you guys have been having and kind of just letting it go on as it would, but I was definitely wanting to kind of touch on the concept of cosmic damage that you brought up, Tracy. Sure. And that there are some researchers that believe giving these topics, this much focus feeds something that is tangibly evil. And I wanted to ask if you had considered, or if anyone had suggested along the way of writing this book of fiction, that the type of fiction and drawing that kind of entertainment-based attention that kind of builds an energy of people in a collective consciousness might serve a more nefarious purpose, or even the modus operandi of Baphomet or the groups that you've kind of seen connected to that.
Well, this is a I guess a moral hazard that the character in my book even faces, and because she's very much based on me, but she's just a little bit maybe more exciting than me, hopefully. But she has the same kind of career as me. It's a very thinly disguised same life story, and in the novel Genuflect, she inadvertently has ended up helping the secret societies that she ends up investigating and dealing with. She ends up helping them to construct their rituals because they read her books, and that helps them gain a greater understanding of the kinds of rituals they're trying to do, and the ancient traditions that they're trying to reconstruct. So I guess it's a something that comes with the territory of writing about yes, anything, including something specifically negative in connotation, that once you solidify the facts on the matter, then someone may be inspired to do the same thing. But I just, I'm a creative person. I'm going to continue working, and you can't, I guess, I don't think I can necessarily take responsibility for the ideas that someone might get if they read something I write, because there are consequences to everything you do, unintended consequences to everything.
So it's kind of a razor's edge that you walk on, and I can understand that it's definitely easier to express some of the more complex or polarizing topics within the realm of fiction. As the disclaimer states, as you and Stephanie discussed earlier, there are characters who could be perceived as people in power now or in recent history, and the fact that the Amazon review, I read one of them, all of which are very, very positive, and highly recommend the book. But there's a caveat of don't underestimate the horror, and do not read this if you aren't in a place where the worst of human hate and evil won't faze you. So I have to say I'm interested in reading the book, simply because I find a little bit of that Desaud-esque need to explore the shadow as much as the light, and not kind of shy away from the worst of humanity and kind of recognize it. So I want to applaud you on having the strength of character and the tenacity to be able to put something like that together. I can't imagine that all of the reviews are so positive, and that you haven't received some kind of pushback from doing this kind of work.
The amazing thing is, so far I haven't gotten any complaints, I guess. No one has said, "Oh, this is awful, I can't believe you did this," which I'm expecting eventually, some kind of response, some kind of negative response. But so far, all those reviews, I don't know those people, and so I'm taking that as genuine positive response. I guess I wrote a good book, so I'm glad about that, because I didn't know, if I could really do this or not. And even when I was finished, I'm like, well, it looks good to me. I like it, but am I crazy? I don't know. So I'm glad that it's been received well. But as far as it being dark, well, for one thing, it really was a very creative act. And although I put a lot of, research and forethought into, everything, every aspect of it, still there's also an aspect in which it wrote itself. I did kind of channel it. Once I got started, it, took on a life of its own. It had its own opinions about how it wanted to be expressed. And I don't know who inspired that, where it came from, really. And I just chose to go with it and not second guess it too much. So I think that it has a magic of its own, and I can only interpret it really almost as an observer, but I really can't tell you what the reasons are why it's so dark in certain areas, or I guess there are a lot of things where I couldn't really explain to you why it is the way it is, but I kind of think it's just kind of perfect that way anyway. It's dark because I think that reflects reality, really, but also I tend to look at the universe that way. I tend to look at the universe as kind of a food chain, and we're always being eaten, and we have the sad fate, I guess, of having to eat others as well, whether you're a vegetarian or not. I'm talking about spiritually, cosmically. I think there's a food chain. I think that we are being fed off of by quite possibly our own creators, and that we are in turn doing the same thing to others. And that this is a cosmic truth that I think is reflected in all of our myths and stories. And of course, when I write my own story, it's going to come out in the same way. So I guess I think it's a negative way of looking at the world, but I don't think there's any other way of looking at the world for me. So it would be hard for me to write something where it totally focused on positive aspects, because it just wouldn't come from me, I suppose.
So would it be safe to say that you are of the mindset that and I can't remember where this came from, but I know it was a study that was done quite some time ago, but that there is no such thing as true altruism?
Yeah, I don't think that that's something that I probably would spend much time trying to answer, because just not what it would just be my opinion. I mean, what I have nothing. There's no information to base that on whatsoever. I have my own morality, and everyone has their own, I guess.
Well, there was, like I said, there was a study. I will have to try to find the original, the origins of it. But there was a study that was done in which the gentleman who was testing a theory of altruism, he gave away like everything. I think he ended up, dying in a gutter or something like that. So the theory that regardless of how much we like to think we are doing something for a positive reason or to help somebody out, that there's always a personal agenda underlying it, that there's always something that we're getting out of it. Much, I think, in the same way that you say, we all feed on one another in a way. So, I may do something kind for someone, but maybe the truth of the matter is I'm just doing it for that recognition of doing something kind. Oh, she's a nice person. That kind of thing.
I think that you could compare it to that in a way that it's like, God, I think, or the gods, whatever we have up there, they created us. They're getting something out of it too. There's a relationship there. There's a reciprocity happening. And so I wouldn't even necessarily say it's a bad thing, but it is the natural process, I think. And just to put an image on this, I guess, and it's kind of a nasty image in a way, but this is the way that they depict it. Okay. The way that you see God's throne depicted sometimes, both in paradise and in the New Jerusalem. You will often see the four rivers of paradise flowing out from his throne. And quite frankly, it looks like a toilet. It looks like a stream is coming out from beneath him as he sits on the throne, and then it's going out into the sewer system of the universe. And then you think about descriptions of us, how we as the saved people who get to go to the heaven or to New Jerusalem, we'll drink from the rivers of life ourselves. And then you also see the Lamb of God, Jesus, or depicting or symbolizing Jesus, and he's got a wound in his throat, and he's bleeding directly into this river also. So it's like a river of excretia material, body fluids that's being shared between us and God. And I don't know how literal to take that exactly, but I think it represents the pipe system of the universe in a way. I think things are, when we worship God, he gets something from us. He gets some kind of energy. In fact, I think he gets energy from us just from us living. It's kind of like the Matrix. We're batteries. We're being sucked off of in that way. When we were put in the Garden of Eden to till the garden, that was really, just putting us there to live. And by living, we're somehow creating a product that others then consume.
It's also interesting that as far as the throne imagery that you just shared, there are groups that engage in that mutually assured destruction through debauchery that have been stated to have parties where they eat excrement and things like that. So, and then with the Lamb of God being the part of where you eat the body and drink the blood of Christ. So it's interesting that all of that imagery kind of rolls out together. And I also noticed that genuflection is the act of kneeling to and showing reverence to a kind of religious entity. So I find it interesting that is that where the name came from? Is that the theory behind it, or was there something else involved in the title of your book?
I came up with the title before I came up with anything else. So it was because I liked the word and I figured it would end up having a meaning, and it did. So the meaning it ended up having really has to do with the cosmic ritual that is going on in the story, which I think, if you're the kind of person that never wants to know what the end of the story is, if you don't want a spoiler, maybe tune out now for the next 2 minutes. But I think, in order to explain this, I'll have to spoil it a little bit. But we're talking about a ritual in which the magician, I guess the person that's conducting the ritual, they're taking in the book, they're kind of taking the form of Mithras. I think I've kind of deconstructed or decoded what I think the real meaning was behind Mithraic ritual. And I think we're describing a situation in which a god, and then in this case, in the ritual, that god is being embodied by the magician, is breaking out of the universe that he's in and creating another, a higher one up above. So in Mithraism, they have all these grades of membership. Well, I think actually this is just kind of what historians have come up with for the symbols that they see, and some of the few written documents they've been able to find, and they put it together and they thought, well, okay, these are the different grades of the of the membership, and they're all named after different planets. Well, when I looked at that stuff and I looked at the little bit of written material there is, and what's known about the mythology of the Mithraic cult in Rome, it seemed to me they're describing Mithras being born from a rock, so he's coming from some other place, beneath us, kind of, and he comes into our world and becomes the god of our world, and then he starts to conquer the higher realms. And the way this cosmology would have been constructed for them back then, they would have thought, that there are these 7 planets and 7 heavens, each one occupied and ruled by one of those planets above us. And, each one of those planets is an archon. That's the way the Gnostics would have seen it, for instance. They're, in control of one of the realms above us. Well, Mithras is breaking through each barrier and conquering each one of those planetary archons and taking over their realm until he gets all the way to the top, which is the sphere of Saturn. And that's why Mithras is Saturn. He becomes Saturn at the end. But in the process, he also becomes the sun. He makes the sun bow down to him. And that's depicted in several of these Mithraims. So I think we're seeing a process, in which one god conquers the others. And he's conquering all these realms of reality as he progresses up the ladder. And so, yes, the title genuflect refers to imagery and symbolism that you see throughout the story, having to do with how the universe really is created through a power play between different, creative entities, god archons, if you will, subjugating each other and subjugating also their creation itself. I think that this is a negative way of looking at it, but if you're a god, you've created a world, and it is necessarily beneath you, and it's not, there's not an accident that our form of religion involves bowing down to gods like that. What I found in my research is that even if you take this this gesture of bowing down out of the religious context and look at other historical depictions of people bowing down, it seems to really come from when one tribe would conquer another, they'd capture some of the people that didn't get killed and turn them into slaves. And one of the first things that happens if you get captured alive, back in, I would say, the earliest days of humanity onward, really. But one of the first things you do is you sort of kneel in submission and hope that you don't get killed. And one of the psychology books I was reading as part of the research I was doing for this book agreed with my, I guess, assumption or my kind of intuition that I had about this gesture of bowing, which is that the author was saying if you bow down, you're giving sexual submission. You're basically saying, rape me, but don't kill me. And so that's how it would have started out in some of the earliest, tribes of humans, when one tribe takes over another. And then, it became codified into the way that you're supposed to be respectful to someone who's above you in social status. And, including that being applied to the relationship between a god and a human. Well, so yeah, I think the way it's used in my story is, I'm pointing out that in the rituals, for instance, that are done, people are being raped and killed. They're being sexually humiliated the whole time. They're being forced to bow down, and entities are being invoked into those people's bodies that are also being humiliated in the process. And that has a cosmic effect on the entire universe. It's what I'm talking about in this story is what I see, the same story being told in every alchemical allegory that's ever been written. It's a ritual of invoking the planetary archons into human bodies and sacrificing them, humiliating them, and then sacrificing them, and then breaking down the bodies and the fluids into a variety of different materials, ashes and things like that, and using all those different materials according to the alchemical formula. And there's several different ways that it's been expressed, but what you're trying to do is you're utilizing a recipe to amalgamate all of those materials from the archons that you've sacrificed to create new ones. And in the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, they create two new god beings, a sun and a moon, a new sun and a new moon, who become the father and mother of a new universe. And that's the way I see it. This is what we're talking about. I see this ritual hinted at, not only in alchemical works, like the Book of Abraham the Jew, for instance, but there's several others I could mention, and also the same imagery is in some of the most secret and most arcane rituals that Aleister Crowley wrote. And I see it in other places too. But I mean, these are just the things that popped out at me. I realized that I had figured out what this ritual is about. It's about destroying a universe through sacrificing the gods and then becoming the god yourself to create a new one. And that's what I wrote the story about. And yes, it's fiction, but not only that, I kind of think it actually is happening.
It's definitely a fascinating concept. I think that if I were to allow my shadow to kind of come out into the playground, I would be reading your book in the process. So I think it's very, very interesting, and that a lot of people will be able to kind of hopefully open themselves to that polarizing topic, or at least be willing to look without flinching at kind of the worst elements of humanity and see what kind of an effect we're having cosmically because of that. So I realize we've actually already gone an hour, and I wanted to see Stephanie if you wanted to come in, but Tracy, I think that we could probably have numerous conversations. I really wanted to get into the mind control book that you wrote, but I feel like if we do that, we'll be on for another 3 hours.
That's okay. It's a book from many, many years ago, and yeah, it's a subject that is never fun to talk about on its own, outside of any other context. And, what can I say about it? I mean, there's mostly it's a bunch of libel or, stuff that's in danger of being libelous if you can't prove it. So, I don't need to go over the details of people who have accused the president of raping them. But, that's what the subject is. It's people who say they've been victimized by people in positions of power, and that there's that happens all the time. That's the way the world is run.
There's a whole kind of deep state, like I said, Project Monarch in and of itself, and the MK Ultra program, and all these different aspects that kind of fall into the line of creating these victims in order to put in front of some of these people as part of their initiation into positions of power. But this is a subject that I believe we are going to get into simply because of its level of controversy and the fact that there are not many people that are willing to have that conversation, similar to the pedophilia and other elements that are just too taboo. But Stephanie,
yes,
jump on back in here and see if you had anything else you wanted to discuss.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the title of your book, and you were talking about this is just an observation, and talking about bowing, going on one knee and bowing, and I thought, isn't it interesting that when a man proposes to a woman, that's the position that he I'm a cynic, call me a cynic, but they get down on one knee and propose, and I think what kind of tradition, where did that stem from when you're talking about what the implications of actually bowing, kneeling and bowing could be? But that was just an observation. I was just imagining that as you were talking about that. I found that quite interesting. And
I was just reading a book that deals with that, actually. Okay, so I was just reading this book called Pornographic Archaeology, and it's sort of an academic book put out by this woman who works for UCLA. The book's put out by University of Pennsylvania. But anyway, so she's, among other things, she talks about how the idea of courtly love was introduced really by historians writing about the Middle Ages rather than something that actually happened very much in the Middle Ages itself. But it became an ideal, and then and it really it's a code of how men should treat the woman that they're in love with. But in the tradition of courtly love, it's never your wife. It's always, your mistress, basically. So,
Right. Yeah.
but the book is interesting because it talks about how first, there were, loveless marriages mostly, and then kind of humiliating, abusive extramarital relationships with prostitutes. And then you had the idea of courtly love being introduced, which had this civilizing effect on the extramarital relations. Not that everyone was doing it or living up to the ideal, but at least you had this societal ideal that's introduced and suggested as, well, if you really want to be a refined person, this is how you should go about the art of love. And so it involved putting the woman on a pedestal and kind of worshiping her in order to, treat her right and be thought of as a gentleman. And it was she's saying, one of the, it was something that really helped elevate the status of women and really helped their position in a romantic relationship. So then she says later, the same ideals then got applied to marriage. That basically around the same time that you had divorce becoming legalized, you had authors pushing this idea that maybe, you should treat your wife this way, and actually you should have a romantic relationship inside of marriage, and maybe that's the ideal. So now if she's right, if she's reconstructing history correctly, then that's the world we live in now. That ideal, which of course no one ever actually lives up to, and we all feel sad because we can't have it. But it was just something that was invented basically to, they were saying actually is invented kind of to help with birth rates, and because marriage was so considered so distasteful. Marriage rates were dropping and birth rates were dropping. Because marriage was kind of this unhappy dynastic alliance, which only mostly wealthy people would even really benefit from. If you don't have any reason to have kids helping you on the farm, then why would you really care? So it's just the society was losing its reason to have marriages, and so first you idealize the extramarital relation in order to take the pressure, I guess, off of the wife. So that the idea was first, it was like, let's have courtly love ideals applied, supposedly, kind of romanticized versions of what they supposedly did in the Middle Ages, to try to encourage people to stay married and go ahead and have this, love life on the side. And then the propaganda kind of got reworked later to rework the idea of marriage and married life, and at the same time they legalized divorce so that there's a way out, I guess. And this is all to make it more appealing to get married and have children. So anyway,
it's just interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I hadn't really thought of that myself. So. It was definitely a good book, and it makes me wonder about, because I've always thought, like you exactly what you said, the way that a man proposes to a woman, for instance, the way that supposedly men are supposed to treat women in the beginning of the wooing stage of a relationship. Well, it does seem kind of humiliating to the man, and I've just always wondered how it doesn't seem to reflect any other aspect of real life. So how did it come up? And now I know. So there you go.
It's interesting to dissect it anyway. I know I sometimes I look at certain aspects of human behavior and just, I feel a little bit, I don't know, I guess I'm quite analytical in that way. And I kind of look at things and I think, oh, that's a very strange thing. I wonder where that came from. But as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, proposal, that's a similar gesture. So no, it's very interesting. But yes, I think on our show, on Shana and I, our show, we are happy to talk about all sorts of very taboo subjects, and particularly the stuff that you're writing about the stuff in your book. It's the type of thing that I've got a lot of time for, to give airtime, because it's something that I don't think many other shows particularly want to give too much airtime to. So, as Shana was touching on the mind control, sex slaves, the CIA stuff, and that sort of thing. That's another book of yours. It's easy to go away after you've heard a podcast, have a look into some of the things that you've talked about, get interested in that, and then you get sidetracked and bogged down with all of that, and you forget to look at the rest of the stuff you've written about. And as we've talked about today, you've covered so many subjects which are completely fascinating, and I just want to read the whole lot. I plan to now, and I have actually started looking at your book that you sent me a copy of, which I'm very grateful for, by the way. I can't wait to carry on reading it. There's already I'm sort of a bit of the way through, and very interested to see where you're going to go with it. But I'm definitely want to read this mind control sex book that you were talking about, and if you wanted to talk a bit about it now, I don't know if it's something that you really want to go into. I'd be happy to cover it.
Well, I wanted to elaborate a bit more on what we were talking about with the position of submission to a woman in the tradition of courtly love. So
let's do it.
It ties in a bit to the personality of the goddess Cybele, which I ended up dealing with that subject quite a lot in Genuflect.
Okay.
Cybele is Baphomet. Okay. So, this is the female aspect of Baphomet. I assume that I know what kind of podcast this is, so I probably don't have to tell you guys who or what Baphomet is too much in terms of that. It's a hermaphroditic goat being, or at least that's the way it's depicted nowadays, ever since the early 1800s. So, Genuflect is all about my real research, and my real research is on the subject of Baphomet. Most recently, in the last couple of years, one of the things I've done in that regard is I had this text translated from the Latin, and it had not been translated into English before yet. In fact, I don't think it had been translated into any, maybe German. I don't think it had been translated in any modern, European language. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So not very many people have actually read it, but it has had a great deal of influence on what people wrote about Baphomet. So the text is called Mysterium Baphometis Revelatum, and it was written in 1818 by this guy, Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall. So he wrote this book that was all about, it wasn't even a book, it was an essay that was inside of a periodical about Orientalism. So anyway, but it was about these artifacts that he said he found all in different places in Europe, in places where there was a structure built on what used to be Templar grounds. So sometimes it was an actually leftover Templar church or cathedral, but sometimes it was just another church that had been built on that grounds or utilizing the framework somehow. But still, so he found things that were on Templar properties, essentially. And that's part of the reason why he thought these things were Templar artifacts. And some of them also came from museums or from private collections. So, some of them were already on display in museums. And then quite a few of them came from friends of his in the aristocracy that had collected various odd things throughout their lives. And so but all these artifacts, he said, were he thought Templar artifacts, and that they all depicted Ophite inspired sex rituals, inspired by Ophite Gnosticism, which is just to give you a general idea, it's a kind of, proto-satanic religion, because it's very much against the creator God. And then the kinds of rituals they were doing. Yes, it involved sex, weird sex rituals, but specifically kind of written to be poking in the eye of the creator God, and putting him down, and reversing the meaning of Jewish rituals to Jehovah, for instance. So it's Ophite Gnosticism was kind of to Judaism what Satanism is to Christianity, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so then he thought that the Templars had been inspired by that and had absorbed a lot of that secret doctrine and were doing similar rituals. So all his artifacts show, people having sex with children and animals. And then they show this figure that he said was the inspiration, or that it represents Baphomet. Okay. But he said that it was referred to on the idols repeatedly as Meat, Mete. He's connected it with Metis, the first bride of Zeus in Greek mythology. She's a wisdom goddess. And also he said it connected her with Cybele. And there's one depiction of Meat on one of these Templar artifacts. It really does look very much like Cybele, the regular depiction of Cybele, but she's got a beard, so that's unusual. But anyway, almost all the idols of Baphomet that he found, he says actual idols plus depictions of idols on carvings and coins and bowls and things, and they all depicted this figure as being hermaphroditic, definitely having breasts and a beard usually, and then sometimes there would be a hole, which I always, when I've been looking at this text for years, had it translated, analyzed it for the Baphomet book that came out 2 years ago, and I'm still analyzing it, and I've got a translation of it with my commentary that'll be coming out, in a few weeks probably. But I've been looking at this text for years, and only recently did I really come to terms with what I was looking at, because, I've always thought, due to the way that the Baphomet is described in modern literature, it's a hermaphrodite. It's got a penis. It's got breasts. Well, but when I actually looked at it, and I looked at it in the context of the Cybele mythology, which is about a mother goddess who has a sexual relationship with her own son, and then gets jealous when he falls in love with someone else and castrates him. And he dies from that, and then she resurrects him, and that's how Attis becomes Attis. Okay, so if you think about that, the Cybele worship is all about castration rituals. Priests were all castrated men, or men that became women through the act of castration.
Yeah.
Well, so then I started looking at this picture of Cybele, or Meat, that Hammer Purgstall had in his book. And I realized, well, that could just be, the urethra hole from having a full castration of, all of the male genitals cut off. And then I started reading about Cybele, and I found out, oh, well, actually, the real story about Cybele is that she was originally a hermaphrodite, and she got castrated by the other gods and kicked out of heaven, and that's how she came to Earth. And then I started looking at this story of Mithras, and I found out that he was born from a rock, right? And I connected that with the fact that Cybele is viewed as being a rock. And then I thought, well, maybe Cybele is really his mother. And then there's more to the story of Mithras. Okay, they say that Mithras, when he decided he wanted to have an heir, a son, he decided to do it in a weird way, because he did not like women. He hated women. The phrase is he detested the race of women. So he decided instead to ejaculate on a rock, and then his son Diorphos was born from that, and that's like the Orphic egg too. So it's like he birthed another universe by doing that.
Wow.
But part of my point is just to point out that Mithras has this weird origin from a rock, and then reproduces in an unnatural way because he hates women. Well, Cybele is a rock, is a castrated hermaphrodite, and the same thing was said about her, that she doesn't like men or women, so she chooses to take the form of a middle gender, and that she wants her priests to have a form that's in between the two genders because she hates both men and women. So all this was very interesting to me, especially you were mentioning the imagery of someone, bowing down to their beloved bride to be, asking for marriage. That image of the humiliated young man feels to me like it's a sad echo in a way of this story of the mother goddess, because yes, that's the story of Cybele and Attis. You see the same thing echoed in a lot of other mother goddess myths. They seem to be the same figure, and this poor son who gets used and abused like that. I think it's really the inspiration for a lot of societal norms that aren't exactly nice to young boys, and also it's an interesting angle to take, I think, on this viewpoint that some people have about a matriarchal society that we might have had in the past, and how great things might have been if the goddess was worshipped instead of male gods, and if women were in charge of society instead of men. I don't know if you've ever read this book. It's called When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone.
No, I haven't read it, but I have heard of it.
Okay, so I read that thing, and she's kind of that book and that author, they're kind of feminist icons in a way.
I was going to ask you about feminism.
Well, I'll just say, like, her book, okay, she goes over all the same material that I just described,
right?
But has a different reaction to it than I did. Like, I think, oh my God, that's horrible. And she kind of just glosses over it and says, well, if we were to bring goddess worship and matriarchal society back, we would have to find some nicer way of dealing with it so that nobody gets abused. It's like, well, don't you think how can you just gloss over that? Isn't that the heart of the whole thing? I mean, how can you just act like that's somehow a more superior way of running the society when it's just as abusive as anything that any patriarchal society has ever done? And I mean, she describes a society where men are slaves to women in the way she thinks societies in the ancient past were run. And she's praising that, and talking about how sad it was when the boys took over. But I mean, what if they were getting castrated and then they had to serve their mom sexually when they were little boys? Wouldn't they maybe want to get out of that situation somehow? So anyway, I think it's a interesting historical truth that for one thing, matriarchy isn't nice, and for another thing, that goddess wasn't even really a woman. Or she was not just a woman, in other words. So it's just a lot of layers of meaning to our mythologies that tell us stuff, I think, about the cosmic truths, and then also about our society and the way we are. It's all connected because we're reflecting, I think, the cosmic truths. We're living out a life that somehow reflects the order of the universe.
As above, so below.
Yeah.
I wonder how you feel about I don't want to let's be controversial if we you can be third wave feminism and that the way gender fluidity, the many different sexual orientations someone can have now, and the many different genders that they can have. All the while you were speaking about that all that mythology and Cybele and this kind of what do you call it, the word's gone from me now, but castration, that sort of thing. How do you think it's affected those archetypes and this kind of emphasis has affected modern society, and this third wave feminism where you do have men that go out there and they are manly and they aren't afraid to be the way that they are, but it's almost getting to a point where the powers that be are pushing an image of a man being subservient to women, and these third wave feminists who've some of them don't even know what the real root of feminism actually stemmed from, are going around and saying that men aren't equals, which kind of defeats the whole object of equality and feminism, and looking at men with disgust if they're not subservient or bowing down to the cause of feminism. And then I suppose that what goes hand in hand with that would be meninism, which is the men that I guess it's the opposing argument, the reaction, the knee jerk from that. How do you feel this has stemmed from that, and what are your observations?
Yeah, I guess I would say when I delved into these creation myths and really started looking at them, specifically the Greek ones that I've been talking about, it struck me that this tendency towards bisexuality or hermaphrodism, and also a sort of animosity to the individual genders, is a trait that, according to the myths, the oldest gods had. And the original god, the first thing, I guess, the first entity that they describe as being in the universe was Gaia and Uranus, right? So you have the sky and the earth. And I still haven't figured out if there's actually a myth that spells out exactly this, but the myths hint at it in such a way that this is the only thing they could be saying. They're saying that Gaia and Uranus were one being, and that they were kind of locked in eternal sexual union, and that's engendering a child within the womb, but the children could not get out. So that's why you have the story of the next generation after them, led by Saturn or Kronos. The way he becomes the king of the gods and overthrows his father is castration. Well, that his mother wants to help him overthrow his father, so she gives him a knife and he castrates his father, and that's how he becomes king of the gods. Well, it seems to me that that it only makes sense if what really happened is they were inside the womb, and then he cuts off the penis while it's still in there, and that's how he can get out out the vagina, because the plug has finally been removed, right? So it's this weird way of thinking about the first male and female divine pair that, before they became male and female, they had to separate somehow. And it's described as this being this cosmic and a very painful event, right? That not only did Uranus, the male half of that original entity, get overthrown, but then they had to be separated from each other eternally, or else the legend is that if Gaia and Uranus come back together again, then the universe will be annihilated. And that's why Atlas, one of those titans, after Kronos and his brothers, the Titans, got defeated in the next generation by Zeus. Zeus put Atlas, one of those Titans, in charge of holding heaven up, on his shoulders, to keep them separated, to keep heaven and earth separated. So it's like that separation is what allows life to happen, but that we wouldn't be here if the original hermaphrodite had not been separated, and if there wasn't something still keeping them apart. And so you can think of it as, well, maybe that's why the gods kind of instinctively hate men and women, or some of them do, and that they kind of instinctively want to turn us against our sexuality. And then not only that, but even, just stop us from procreating, stop us from approaching life in what seems to us to be the natural way, because they come from a supernatural realm. They came from a place that's preceded all of this. And it's all everything that is natural to us is artificial to them. So yeah, it's just interesting. I think that this is kind of a primordial thing. It feels unnatural. It feels new, but really, the trends that we're seeing in society, I think, are in a way an expression of feelings that go back to the gods themselves and the very beginnings of creation, the pain of different opposing elements separating out of a unity. So, the ideal, you can see why the ideal of hermaphroditism is appealing, because it's, the idea of going back to that original unity. Mm. But so much of what we see going on in society right now is just people splitting off into more categories, hating each other more, obsessing about how to define themselves. And definitely it does seem to, I think, be having a bad effect on fertility and relationships. And we discussed earlier, well, what is the ideal of that? Because it's not always been the same. What we think of as the ideal of love and family has not always been the same. But still, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, again, it is controversial, so I don't want to offend too many people, but I'm one of the many people that feels a little overwhelmed by how things are changing. And when I was a kid, I was very boyish in a lot of ways. I wanted to play with the boys' toys, and I thought most of the girls' toys were boring, and I didn't want to do hair and makeup and stuff like that. I waited till I was a teenager to get into that. Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I don't know, sometimes I would get made fun of for that a little bit, but, then I had adults to tell me, oh, it's okay. It's normal. Why shouldn't you be allowed to do that? Well, what if I had had a society that thought that was a sign that I'm actually a boy? Not just that I like to do boy things, but I'm actually a boy. And you'd better change my hormonal chemistry now before I change into a girl, because then I'll be really sad. So, I am glad, frankly, that nobody encouraged me to think that way when I was in a vulnerable state. And I guess that's what I'll leave it to. Although I know I'm friends with people that will vehemently disagree with me and think, they know when a child actually wants to be the opposite sex of born, and that they know when to rush in and start that process. And, I frankly wouldn't. I think I'm shocked at that people have the nerve to do that, but I'm not going to say anything else, because I'm not in charge at this point. It's already left the gate and I have no control.
Exactly.
I'm wrong. I've been deemed wrong already by society. So I'll shut up.
No, I think that your perspective is probably shared by so many people out there, and there's an argument for and an argument against it. I can see pros and cons to both, but it does seem that if you're a young person and you're still developing, you kind of need to be given a bit of time to really know who you are and where you're going in life. But like you said, controversial, perhaps best left alone. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to mention just a few thoughts while you were discussing the hermaphroditic states of archetype that we were looking at. And by the way, I love talking about mythology. There's so many things that we could carry on talking about today that we could talk forever. I really think we could talk forever. But yeah, you're talking about Baphomet. I kept on seeing the Devil Tarot card, particularly the Arthur Waite, the Rider Waite deck, which is really the most popular tarot deck. The Devil card, which depicts Baphomet, and he's clearly hermaphroditic on that one. And also I think it's the World card, which is the last in the major arcanas, which has the hermaphrodite, which you're not able to see that it's a hermaphrodite in the image, but actually the hermaphrodite, it is a hermaphrodite in that image. And it's those two cards. Well, the World card symbolizes completion, so the hermaphroditic state is considered to be the completion state. Right. I don't know, so many things were coming to me. You were talking about the division of Gaia and Uranus, and the castration, and I was imagining the again talking about like the fractured psyche, and the division of trying to separate yourself from a previous state to developing into a new rebellious state when you're a teenager maybe, and that kind of journey that you go through where you shed a skin and you move away from something, and often usually to come back to the thing that you were trying to push away from in the first place. So you've taken me on such a journey today talking about all the things that you're interested in, and I'm fascinated. I'm so glad you came on the show. Shana, are you there, and are you do you have anything else to say to Tracy today?
I am here. I would also like to thank you, Tracy, for joining us today. I think that having our conversation definitely solidifies the idea that we are trying to create an open forum for people to be able to share their theories, topics, and ideas that they either hold close to heart or find genuine interest in. And as far as controversy, we are completely open to the taboo topics, which is what our listeners, I think, are really coming back to hear. And I appreciate you being willing to so openly discuss some of the more not always controversial, but maybe some of the more realistic versus optimistic perspectives that you've shared today. I would like to know if there's anywhere in particular that our listeners can kind of follow up, where they can find the book, and then also how they might keep updated on your progress, especially with kind of shifting into the entertainment realm as far as film and TV media.
Well, you can always go to tracytwyman.com. I will try to keep that updated as best as I can. Also, my books are all on amazon.com or in the associated websites of Code UK and all those branches of Amazon throughout the world. And then if you go to my website, you can join my mailing list, which is probably the best thing to do, because that way, I may not tell you necessarily the same day when I do something. I may not get around to it, but eventually you'll hear about the things I do and you won't miss anything. I just want to actually mention one detail about Baphomet and the Eliphas Levi depiction of him in regards to whether or not he's a hermaphrodite. Because again, this is something that I only realized a few months ago after years of writing about Baphomet, describing him as a hermaphrodite. And I'm not saying he isn't, but the depiction of Eliphas Levi, and he describes in detail actually what each element of this figure means. And I only just recently realized there isn't even really a penis there. It's a pole. It's the pole of the caduceus. And he says so. The caduceus is there in place of the penis. And then there's this thing, this semicircle arched over the pole, the top of the pole. So it's like resting there on top of his lap. And Eliphas Levi says that semicircle, that arch, represents the atmosphere. So that is the sky. That is heaven. That is Uranus, who was castrated. And even the meaning of the word heaven, look up the etymology of it. It means hard, stony vault. Oh. So it is like the vault of the sky is the sickle that castrated Uranus. And that is what's, separated heaven from earth. And here you have a pole right in the middle of Baphomet's body in his crotch region, in place of a penis holding up the sky, essentially. So, and then, I won't get into all the other stuff about, the pillars of heaven, collapsing the pillars of heaven. That's it's what the book Genuflect really is all about. That's what the ritual is all about. So, but anyway, I wanted to throw that out there because, if people don't believe that Baphomet actually is a castrated hermaphrodite, Cybele, the castrated hermaphrodite, look at Eliphas Levi's depiction once again, and you'll see what I'm saying.
I was, funnily enough, while you talking about all of this, I was looking up at my Transcendental Magic book by Eliphas Levi. The whole time throughout the show, it was calling me throughout the whole show. So there you go. That's obviously why.
I think the paragraph where he describes it is in that book. So yeah.
Wow, really? Oh, okay. Well, that's it. Another reason to revisit that one then. Okay, Tracy, you've inspired me, and I've been completely riveted throughout the whole show today. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. I really hope that you'll come back and tell us about some of your other projects and anything else you want to talk about in the future.
Sure, I would be happy to. Thank you very much for having me on.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.